Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
This is Jane. She thinks she's just filling her car, but she's also filling the air with cancer-causing toxic chemicals used to boost octane in gas. What doesn't burn in the engine enters the air and your lungs, even your heart and brain. Bad for everyone, especially kids. Ethanol is a natural octane booster, clean burning and non-toxic. More ethanol means less scary stuff in our gas and in the air we breathe. And that makes your choice pretty plain, Jane. American Ethanol, cleaner air for Nebraska.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Bridget Nelson. On this episode, Frayne Olson describes how weather conditions continue to impact both soybean and wheat markets. Brad Lubben gives us an update on Farm Bill discussions. Steve Johnson and Ryne Norton address some upcoming deadlines. And Koehler-Cole explains UNL's research on cover crop productivity in corn and soybean systems. North Dakota State Extension economist Frayne Olson is our market analyst this week. The Argentine drought continues to fuel the soybean market rally and help corn prices. According to the USDA, the WASI report will soon be updated to determine the overall production in both Brazil and Argentina. For trade, it is still unknown if South America's low soybean production rates will improve U.S. exports. For winter wheat, drought conditions in the U.S. along with colder temperatures in Russia and Europe are impacting yield potential. We talked with Frayne Wednesday morning to learn more about how the weather is affecting these markets.
Yeah, so the short-term focus is really on what's happening in Argentina. We're also following the Brazilian harvest right now, so soybeans and corn are being harvested in northern Brazil. We're getting some yield reports coming out of that, very positive numbers from a yield standpoint. So, you know, it doesn't look like there's any major concerns coming out of Brazil. The primary focus is Argentina. Again, we're continued to have kind of seasonal temperatures, which are very warm at this time of year, but also some very dry conditions. So they've been getting some rain showers, but the rain showers have always been a little bit under what everybody expected. So we're entering some very critical growth stages for both corn and soybeans. On the corn side, they're reaching the pollination stage. On the soybean side, it's really the flowering and pod filling stage, depending upon where you are in the country. So the fact that the crop is under some stress right now is really raising some concerns about how good a production or how will yields be coming out of Argentina, and kind of what are the implications then for world trade.
So how do prices look for soybeans?
So the futures market for both old crop soybeans as well as new crop soybeans, the November contract, we're actually now at contract highs. We've been able to go past the highs that were set earlier in July when we had some weather problems showing up earlier in the U.S. So what I'm telling farmers is, you know, my underlying question is, so what are you waiting for? And the short-term answer is everybody, well, when's the top going to be in? And of course, nobody really knows that. One of the things I'm trying to encourage farmers to look for is a kind of a turning point or a key shift in the market would be as long as the crop conditions and the weather reports coming out of Argentina continue to put downward pressure on yields, as long as it looks like the crop is getting smaller, I do think the rally in soybeans will continue. But once we get to that point where it looks like conditions have stabilized or about as bad as they're going to get in Argentina, I do think at least short term the top will be in the marketplace. We'll see some retracement after that. But we're going to need this continuing deterioration of conditions in Argentina to keep this rally going. So I do think it's going to be a short-term play.
In addition to the soybean rally, there will also be an update with the WASI report from the USDA. What do you expect from that report?
Yeah, so what the traders and analysts will be looking for is a couple things. Number one, what are the yield forecasts or production forecasts that USDA is putting on both Argentine as well as Brazilian corn and soybeans? Again, the soybeans will be the focus. How large is the crop going to be? Is USDA going to increase the production for soybeans out of Brazil? The other thing that we'll be watching is, will that translate into additional export sales out of the U.S.?
Will the WASI report also affect corn?
Yeah, so the corn market is responding to the problems in Argentina, but obviously not as aggressively. Exports out of the U.S. are important for the corn market, but the two largest consumers for corn are both the feed sector as well as the ethanol sector. So if we have extra corn to sell, it's going to be into the international markets. But the corn rally hasn't been as aggressive. So the Argentine crop is much more important for soybean prices than it is for corn prices. So we have seen some response there, but again, just not as aggressively. I know there's a lot of farmers kind of frustrated with kind of the poor, lower prices we've seen, the low volatility, the lack of responsiveness in the corn market.
In addition to corn and soybeans, there has been a lot of talk about drought in the U.S., along with cold temperatures in Russia and Europe. How are those conditions affecting the wheat market?
Yeah, the wheat market, especially the winter wheat market right now, first focuses on what's happening in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Colorado has crop conditions are a little bit better, but the crop conditions, the winter wheat condition reports that came out this week showed quite a bit of deterioration from this time last year. So there is some concerns. We've been having a lot of rains coming through the eastern portion of Texas and Oklahoma, but that's been drifting up into the Missouri and the Ohio River valleys where we're seeing the flooding. And as we shift into Europe as well as into the Black Sea region, they've had a pretty mild winter most of the season, but now there's a really hard cold spell hitting most of Western Europe as well as drifting into the Eastern European and the Russian wheat producing region. Again, their crop is starting to break dormancy. The question is, will these cold temperatures have an impact on the winter hardiness or the yield potential coming out of the Black Sea region? Again, major competitor in the winter wheat markets.
Next week, Mike Briggs will join us to look at cattle markets. Since the last time we talked with Nebraska Extension Policy Specialist Brad Lubben, the expectations of Farm Bill discussions would depend on a budget outcome for both the cotton and dairy issues. But with the two-year budget deal being passed early February, the expectations of the new Farm Bill have changed. We sat down with Brad Lubben last Friday in Geneva, Nebraska, at the Farmers and Ranchers College's Crop Insurance Farm Bill Policy Update and More workshop to discuss what is now expected for the new Farm Bill and how trade policy and energy policy are also affecting today's producers.
The budget deal passed in early February in Congress and signed by the President not only sets a budget for the federal government for the next 2 years, but it also addresses this cotton and dairy issue by including some proposed language to change programs and to effectively put them into the mix so that they're part of the baseline for the next Farm Bill. Altogether, that means that perhaps the biggest hurdle to get across to start this process in earnest has been solved. We may or may not have cotton and dairy completely addressed, but the major questions about them have been resolved to the point that we might expect the Farm Bill to move forward rather quickly at this point.
Another issue Brad mentioned was the debate about reforming SNAP, also known as the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program within the Farm Bill.
If we look at the cost of the farm program, and we could look at the last Farm Bill and note there are 12 titles, 4 of them have the overwhelming amount of funding. 99% of the funding goes to commodities, crop insurance, conservation, and nutrition assistance. That's SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and that one by itself is more than 75% of the total funding. But there's a lot of debate about reforming SNAP. Frankly speaking, however, it should be thought that that's really sort of its own separate debate. What happens with SNAP addresses what gets spent on SNAP. It doesn't really fundamentally, in my mind, affect the debate on the rest of the Farm Bill, specifically the farm side of the Farm Bill. There are some that have historically said, well, if you would split the food portion and the farm portion, then the farm portion would be smaller. It would not be as much of a political battle. There's a reason they're together, and they've been part of this coalition for the better part of 50 years. That being said, don't look at the food side as a way to pay for the farm side.
In addition to SNAP, the ARC and PLC programs are another concern.
we look at the current programs that we have, the ARC program and the PLC program and the current Farm Bill. And we know that ARC started out very strong in terms of providing the most support to producers of major Nebraska commodities. As prices have fallen, however, the ARC guarantee has also fallen over time, such that if you analyzed it today at lower prices, the PLC program looks like it would provide the most support going forward. And if you made a new decision on effectively this very similar ARC and PLC program, but under today's price conditions, we may fundamentally shift how we sign up, and PLC might become a much more significant, by all accounts, is expected to become the much more significant choice for producers. We still have some issues to address, and not knowing exactly what the final version of legislation might look like. But at current price expectations, clearly the balance between the two is much different than it was back in 2014.
The farm program is also tied to crop insurance. However, the crop insurance program might have a few cuts in the new Farm Bill.
We know producers are currently living under the last 2 years of the current farm program. They will get support in late 2018 on the final results of the 2017 crop, and they'll get support in 19 on the 18 crop. But we need to marry the farm program support together with the rest of their risk management decisions. And the first one we might think of is think of crop insurance, and think of how crop insurance relates to marketing decisions. The crop insurance program itself is under some attack in this Farm Bill debate. Why the ag sector is certainly pushing for maintaining the crop insurance program, while the ag committees are most likely to report out a bill that supports the crop insurance program. There is some potential fight on the floor when the Farm Bill gets to that stage of cuts to the crop insurance program.
According to Brad, with the new Farm Bill, it is easy to forget about the other issues affecting producers, such as trade and energy.
On the trade front, we see the potential for growth in export opportunities, at the same time that we also see a lot of concerns about trying to renegotiate existing agreements or getting involved in disputes with existing trading partners, to the extent that there's concern about what that means for demand for U.S. ag products. So there's a little bit of, not a little, a lot of trepidation out there about the impact of trade policy discussions on ag market opportunities. At the same time, there's a lot of policy debate in Washington over energy policy, specifically the renewable fuel standard and the role of biofuels in the nation's fuel supply. Efforts to sustain the biofuels mandate as passed by Congress more than a decade ago, sort of pitted against efforts to try and dismantle the mandate as we know it today. While the mandate helped to grow the biofuels sector, that is a strong demand component of the of U.S. agricultural production, particularly corn, it's somewhat less clear as to what happens if that mandate is substantially changed or revised here going forward. There's clearly a role for biofuels. There's clearly a well-established industry, but there's an awful lot of policy uncertainty that could affect at the margin where demand goes. So producers get to watch even more and try and manage the risk that they face in more than just the farm policy arena.
As a reminder, there are still 3 Farm Bill forums held by Nebraska Extension in partnership with Kansas State Extension and Research this month. More information about the forums is available at ianrnews.unl.edu. It might not be as common to see combines harvesting golden fields of winter wheat in June and July in the eastern part of Nebraska, but Nathan Mueller, Nebraska Extension cropping systems educator in Dodge and Washington counties, says some growers in the area have expressed interest in adding wheat to their rotation, even if it means 20 to 40 acres. With the right variety, nitrogen management, and crop protection, it's not uncommon to raise 90 to 100 bushel per acre winter wheat in eastern Nebraska. You can read more about how one can add wheat to a rotation in the March Nebraska Farmer. There are 2 important deadlines to be addressed for the month of March. They include crop insurance and the Non-Insured Disaster Assistance Program. Both of these programs are due on the 15th of March. Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Farm and Ag Business Management Specialist Steve Johnson and Fillmore County Service Agency Director Ryne Norton addressed these two deadlines to us last Friday in Geneva, Nebraska, at the Farmers and Ranchers College's Crop Insurance Farm Bill Policy Update and More workshop.
March 15th is the deadline for the spring planted crops. Anyone adding new land in the county must notify their crop insurance agent by that March 15th date. Another change that's coming for 2018 is third-party loss, especially around dicamba. Think about crop protection chemical that's accidentally sprayed or drifts onto your soybeans. Your federal crop protection would not cover that loss. That will be under a third party. However, if you do suffer loss and you notify your crop insurance agent in a timely fashion, that's called NOL or Notice of Loss, then you can reduce those acres from the database used to calculate your actual production history. And perhaps more importantly, in 2018, crop insurance premiums will likely be lower than they were in 2017.
In addition to crop insurance, FSA, also known as the Farm Service Agency, has a deadline on March 15th for the Non-Insured Disaster Assistance Program.
That program is a program that you can insure crops that are uninsurable through federal crop insurance. So examples would be fruits and vegetables, some forage crops. It's not an extensive coverage in most cases. There is a buy-up policy if they want to. So it's a low-level risk management for their operation, but it's something that is not very cost prohibitive either.
According to Ryne Norton, the ability to get deadline information can be available from all individual county offices by joining the FSA text message alert system on one's phone. Contact
their county office and get the number and the password that signs them up for text message alerts basically on deadlines. The only information that can come to them is on deadline information. There's nothing that you can be contacted individually about your individual operations and farming or anything like that. And the neat thing about it is there's only one or two a month that you may get on the deal, but it also can give you information on if we have a disaster program that gets declared because of drought or something, then we would be able to use that text messaging service to alert you that that program's available.
Ryne Norton also says producers should always remember to enroll for the annual contract for ARC and PLC. Ryne suggests producers enroll in ARC and PLC before they become busy in the spring. However, the deadline is not until the 1st of August. Over the past 4 years, UNL Research has been conducting a study on cover crops and how they affect yield potential in both corn and soybeans. We sat down with UNL Postdoctoral Research Associate of Agronomy and Horticulture, Koehler-Cole, during late February to learn more.
The study was started with funding from the corn and soybean boards in 2014. 2014 was the first season we planted cover crops in corn and soybean systems. And we did this research to figure out whether we can fit cover crops into a corn-soybean rotation in Nebraska and what the implications on corn and soybean yields would be. All of our plots are on research stations. So we have the one in Concord, we have the one in Meade, we have one in South Central Nebraska, South Central Ag Lab, and then we had one out at Brule at the Western Central Research and Extension Station there. This one is now discontinued, but the other ones we still have. And at all of the 3 research sites, we plant cover crops into corn, into soybeans, and into continuous corn. So every year we plant it in each of the 3 phases, and we use the same cover crops at each site. And we also plant at 2 different times. So one is an early planting where we broadcast it into the corn or soybean stands, and one is a late planting where we drill after corn and soybean harvest. So we use cereal rye, planted alone, and also cereal rye in 2 mixes. So one mix had cereal rye at a seeding rate of 30 pounds per acre, and then it also included hairy veg, winter pea, and a forage radish. And the other one had cereal rye at 20 pounds per acre, and it included hairy veg, winter pea, forage radish, collards, as well as a clover. And the cereal rye, when we planted it alone, was planted at 60 pounds per acre. And then we also had a legume mix, that was hairy veg and winter pea, and we had a pure planted forage radish.
According to Katya in her Crop Watch article, each of the research sites were terminated 2 weeks before planting both corn and soybeans. However, the results varied among each of the different research sites. First, trial site Brule, located in western Nebraska, was discontinued due to a short fall growing season and the lack of precipitation, which restricts cover crop productivity. Clay Center, the only irrigated site, was planted early and produced less than 500 pounds per acre of dry matter in each cropping sequence. At Concord, cover crops were planted before the corn was sampled on April 20th, resulting in less than 300 pounds per acre of biomass in both the early and late plantings. Finally, the site at Meade contained early rye, which resulted as the most productive cover crop since it maintained a higher biomass than late rye.
Cover crops, especially cereal rye, are really good for preventing soil erosion. In Nebraska, we still have quite a bit of water erosion going on. Even in no-till fields, we also have wind erosion, especially over soybean. So cereal rye is really good because it has the living grounds in the soil that prevent the soil from being blown away. So that is the main reason why farmers should grow cover crops. The other reason is we have pretty high levels of soil nitrate in the spring. We also have high levels of nitrate that's leaching into the groundwater. So cover crops can take up some of that nitrate, prevent it from leaching, and once they're killed, they decompose, and that nitrate is then recycled back into the soil, so instead of being lost or ending up in our groundwater or elsewhere.
Katya also says that for winter cover cropping in corn and soybean systems in Nebraska, rye is the most productive cover crop, followed by the rye plus 3 mix containing rye, vetch, pea, and collards, along with the rye plus 5 mix containing rye, vetch, pea, collards, black oats, and Balenza clover. Katya also says that when rye is killed, it forms a thick mulch that will keep the soil cool, prevent weeds from growing, and also prevent some evaporation from the soil. Even though UNL's cover crop project was in its 4th and final year in 2017, there are always new goals for the upcoming year.
We're hoping to have our last round of soil physical testing, where we test again the density and water aggregate stability. We're also going to conduct a test where we are looking at soil microbial activity. We actually have measured soil nitrate, NPK actually, and organic C in every year, but in 2018 we hope to measure it in the deeper soil layers as well. It's a really interesting topic. Lots of farmers are really keen on learning more about it, so we're happy to share our knowledge with them.
Now with this week's weather forecast, here's Nebraska Extension ag climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we are again for the weekly forecast. During this last week, the major precipitation during the entire period was last Saturday with that system that was coming through the Central Plains. We did see several inches of snow in portions of western Nebraska, but pretty much light trace amounts across eastern Nebraska. And then we've seen a warming trend develop, particularly as we got into the midweek period and beyond, as temperatures soared beyond 50 degrees. Really started to see a lot of frost come out of the ground, particularly the southern half of the state. And I would expect that trend to continue for the next couple days before we see some colder weather move in. Some of the deeper frost in the northwestern panhandle most likely will not completely come out of the profile for at least another week to 10 days. But we are seeing improving conditions. More importantly, we have a big system that is ongoing across the western United States and will impact our weather. So if we go to the upper air charts, we'll track to see how the system is going to move and play our weather. Here's the upper trough beginning to make us move inland. We have a high pressure ridge aloft at the surface in the Central Plains, so that's going to bring up some warm air into our region. It's going to be a very nice day today. Warm, windy, but precipitation free, as the vast majority of that remains to the northwest. More importantly, tomorrow that upper air low starts to move into western Texas, and with that movement of the upper low into Texas and surface low at Kansas, we're going to see some big moisture advection toward the north, and that's going to fire off some accumulating snowfall across the northern Rockies and potentially moving into northwestern Nebraska. And as we go into the day on Monday, this upper air low starts to move into eastern Iowa, so we are going to see some of that low pressure system that's in eastern Iowa bring that moisture moisture around and fill in much of the area from northern Minnesota to northeast Nebraska with accumulating snowfall, potentially all the way down to south central Nebraska before it moves out of the region. And then on Tuesday, the upper air low starts to push toward the eastern seaboard. High pressure system tries to build into our region. It's not Arctic air, so we're not looking at a substantial cool down, but it will be a little bit cooler than normal as the main precipitation band moves toward our east. And then on Wednesday, we start to see signs of ridge trying to build into our region. The low itself tries to broaden out somewhat, so we may see cooling delayed slightly in eastern Nebraska, but definitely western Nebraska under the influence of high pressure will be above normal, with precipitation free across the center part of the country. Now, as we go into the day on Thursday, we see some of that activity expected with another next impending storm moving into the Pacific Northwest. Surface low down in Nevada will help to give some lift, orographic lift, to the western United States, and we'll see that precipitation in earnest continue into the northwestern United States. And then on Friday, that ridge starts to pull toward the east as we see trough coming into the northwestern United States. Low pressure in southern Nevada once again will enhance the precipitation over California, and this system will slowly make its way toward the southern plains as we get late into next weekend, and then start to emerge out during the middle part of the week into the central United States. That could potentially bring us yet another major weather maker. In terms of the 8 to 14 day forecast from next Thursday to the following Tuesday, of course, with that low coming in, colder than normal conditions, warmer than normal conditions ahead of the front. And in terms of precipitation, widespread above normal moisture, below normal across the southern plains, southern Rockies, and above normal across the southeastern United States.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews are available individually on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. They include information on corn, soybean, and wheat markets, farm bill discussions, March deadlines, and cover crop research. As always, you can continue to keep up with Market Journal during the week on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Next week, DTN Senior Ag Meteorologist Bryce Anderson will give us an update on Argentina's weather conditions. Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Farm and Ag Business Management Specialist Steve Johnson will share some of his market strategies, and Jessica Groskopf will talk about how the Women in Agriculture Conference educates and uplifts women producers involved in any aspect of Nebraska's agricultural industry. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Bridget Nelson.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.